The arrival of Lewis Hamilton at Ferrari was bound to shake things up, and despite the inevitable period of adaptation, the seven-time world champion is already proving that his competitive edge remains as sharp as ever. His ability to extract every ounce of performance from a car, no matter how unfamiliar, is nothing short of impressive. Pairing him with Charles Leclerc, a driver who shares a similar racing philosophy, should, in theory, make it easier for Ferrari to fine-tune their machine to suit both talents. But the burning question remains: can this iconic team finally mount a serious title challenge? As the 2025 season kicks off, Ferrari stands among the key contenders hoping to dethrone the reigning champions, McLaren. Had it not been for a disastrous string of races between Spain and Italy last season, they might have already secured the Constructors' title with room to spare. However, mid-season updates didn't deliver as expected, leaving the team scrambling for solutions. While they did manage to recover, the inconsistency proved costly. This time they can't afford a repeat of past mistakes. Ferrari entered the off-season with high hopes, believing that a productive winter could firmly place them in the title fight. But after pre-season testing, some doubts have already started creeping in. While every team faces initial hurdles with a new car, the issues emerging with the SF-25 cannot be overlooked. If Ferrari is serious about contending for the championship, these problems need urgent attention. Early testing always comes with a learning curve, but the key is identifying and addressing weak points before the real battle begins. Over the 3 days in Bahrain, Ferrari gathered crucial data to compare their factory simulations with real-world performance. The positive takeaway? Most of their numbers aligned as expected. The downside? Some unforeseen issues still surfaced, and one of the biggest concerns is that the SF-25 hasn't quite delivered the raw speed they anticipated. Meanwhile, McLaren's MCL-39 has already turned heads, displaying impressive pace and consistency over long runs. Another red flag for Ferrari? The car's handling. Reports from the paddock suggest the SF-25 feels unpredictable, making it difficult to push to the limit, a challenge neither Hamilton nor Leclerc can afford if they want to take the fight to McLaren from the very first race. Leclerc, Ferrari's most experienced driver, didn't hesitate to acknowledge the challenge McLaren presents. While testing is primarily about fine-tuning their own setup, it's impossible to ignore what the competition is doing. He admitted, "Whenever there's a race run, you always take a look at what the others are doing. But without knowing the exact conditions they're running, it's hard to draw conclusions. Still, this test gave us a good idea of where we need to improve." Ferrari's testing pace wasn't disastrous, but it wasn't particularly reassuring either, raising concerns. For Hamilton, the seven-time champion has already endured 2 frustrating seasons with an unpredictable Mercedes, especially in 2023 and 2024. If the SF-25 turns out to be another difficult-to-control machine, his transition to Ferrari could prove far more challenging than expected. The consensus within the paddock is clear: Ferrari must act quickly. They need to ensure the SF-25 is stable, predictable, and allows both drivers to extract maximum performance. Leclerc has already emphasized that more work is needed before Melbourne, and with only days left before the season opener, Ferrari is running out of time. As Leclerc put it, "We still have quite a bit of work to do to be ready for Melbourne." That's what we're focusing on with Lewis. If McLaren wanted the perfect start to the season, they seem to have nailed it. Their MCL-39 appeared to be one of the strongest cars in preseason testing, displaying incredible balance, minimal tire degradation, and most importantly, raw speed. In contrast, Ferrari found themselves struggling to match that level of consistency. The SF-25 wasn't necessarily slow, but it lacked the refined setup that McLaren had seemingly mastered. With the first race just around the corner, that's a serious concern. So, what's holding Ferrari back? One major issue is their ongoing search for the optimal setup. While the SF-25 isn't as unpredictable as last year's Mercedes W15, the team has yet to fine-tune its performance window. Without that, they risk falling behind a McLaren team that looks more prepared than ever. The big question is whether Ferrari can turn things around. Last season, they proved they could adapt when mid-season upgrades initially caused more harm than good. They put in the effort to correct their mistakes, and it worked. But this time, they don't have the luxury of waiting. They need to be proactive rather than reactive. McLaren already looks like a serious threat, meaning Ferrari cannot afford a slow start. If they lose too much ground in the opening rounds, recovering later will be significantly tougher than last year. And with the upcoming 2026 regulation, changes demanding long-term focus, Ferrari has to ensure they remain within striking distance early on. Adding to Ferrari's concerns are the observations of respected F1 designer Gary Anderson. He has pointed out that the SF-25 might not be the kind of car that suits Lewis Hamilton's driving style. From 2022 to 2024, Hamilton faced challenges with an unpredictable Mercedes, and last season was particularly frustrating. Despite securing 2 victories, it was statistically one of the toughest years of his career. The early signs from testing suggest that the SF-25 isn't a major step forward compared to last year's Mercedes W15. The car doesn't seem as stable as one would expect for a driver like Hamilton, who excels when given a well-balanced machine that allows him to extract maximum performance with minimal struggle. If Ferrari's new car proves difficult to handle, it could complicate Hamilton's transition more than anticipated. That being said, Hamilton is one of the greatest drivers in the history of Formula One. Adapting to different cars is part of what makes elite drivers successful, and there's no doubt he will find a way to get the most out of the SF-25. However, the key question remains: will the car allow him to fight for the title from the very start, or will Ferrari need more time to refine its performance? Meanwhile, the FIA has introduced stricter regulations regarding flexible wings for the 2025 season, aiming to close any loopholes teams might have been exploiting. New front wing tests will be implemented in Spain, but changes to rear wing flexibility are taking effect immediately, starting with the season opener in Australia. Following a detailed analysis of the 2024 season, the FIA made it clear that bodywork flexibility will no longer be a gray area. One of the key concerns is the small gap that forms between the main plane and the DRS flap, particularly towards the outer edges of the rear wing. According to rival teams, Red Bull, Ferrari, and McLaren have been taking advantage of this to improve aerodynamic efficiency at high speeds. During testing, McLaren even introduced a low-down-force rear wing, which wasn't ideal for Bahrain, but served as a reference point. A flatter wing is more difficult to flex, so the team used it to analyze any potential movement. This led to speculation when Flovis paint on the MCL39 raised questions about how its rear wing behaves under load. At the same time, Mercedes found itself under the spotlight. Although Red Bull's Pierre Wache didn't directly name them, there was plenty of talk in the paddock about the W16's wings, both front and rear. Onboard footage revealed noticeable flexing, which could provide an advantage by reducing drag on the straights while maintaining downforce through corners. Ferrari, fully aware of the FIA's tightened regulations, spent the first 2 days of testing closely examining the flexibility of their rear wing, particularly in the outer sections, where new deflection tests will be enforced. Interestingly, the SF-25 was the only car fitted with special markers to collect additional data. An intentional move, as the FIA plans to use the same method for monitoring rear wing movement in Australia. Earlier this week, the governing body issued a fresh technical directive, TD-034, detailing a new visual inspection process. High-resolution FIA cameras will track rear wing behavior in real time, while special stickers will be placed on wing profiles, similar to the system used for front wings between Belgium and Singapore last season. With the Australian Grand Prix just days away, Ferrari faces a critical challenge. McLaren has emerged as a serious threat, while Ferrari still needs to fine-tune the SF-25 to ensure it is both stable and competitive from the start. Leclerc and Hamilton require a car that offers consistency and control, and at the moment it's not quite there. Ferrari has the resources, the talent, and the determination to fight for the championship, but time is running out. The first race will reveal whether they've managed to resolve their early issues or if McLaren will have the upper hand. What do you think? Can Ferrari make the necessary adjustments in time, or will they be chasing McLaren from the very first race? The answer will start to unfold in Melbourne.